What's up, amigos? Commander Jaime here. Today we're gonna do a Zorga deck profile for standard. I am excited because we just got the new cards from the new D booster. We're gonna go over the winning image, then we're gonna go over some of the card choices. And this deck's a little different, so I'm gonna structure it a little bit different, but hopefully it makes more sense. And then after that, give some credit, and then of course, with the outro. So let's get right into it. Also, quick sponsorship note out to Nex LvL Gaming. And so if you guys are excited for the overdress stuff that's coming out, definitely recommend checking out his shop. He has a lot of shirts for different nations such as Zorga, Magnolia, and many more if you're in different nations. So check it out, and you get a 10% discount if you click on the link below in the description as well. So feel free to check it out and support the channel. So with the winning image for the deck, so what does Zorga even do? And so what Zorga does, it has the Alchemagic mechanic. And so when you play an order card, you're able to perform Alchemagic. That way, where a different order in your drop zone, you can bind that and gain that skill. And so you're able to essentially use 2 orders and once per turn. Like, that's pretty cool. All decks can only do once per turn at that point, so this helps take advantage of that too. So as you can see, we have 2 that typically are the ones that I go to the most. Spiritual Body Condensation, whereas the Soul Blast one, revive a card from your drop zone that is a grade equal or less to your Vanguard, and it gets plus 5k. And then you got this order over here where it's kind of last one. Your whole front row gets plus 10k until the end of the turn. So these are the mostly to-go cards, so you can revive cards, build a field, and give power. Zorga's second skill is also important, is that it kind of lasts one. You can revive one of your units from drop zone and call it to rear guard. It's a once per turn. So it has that Grand Blue aesthetic, especially if you're a Grand Blue player. One of the things that my friend Duke in playtesting had mentioned, because I am a Grand Blue player, the deck seemed a lot more natural to figure things out. And so if you're already used to Grand Blue and also deck building, you already know that Grand Blue, when it comes to deck building, there's so many possibilities, there's so many things to consider, especially if you're playing in premium. But with that same mindset and you apply it to Zorga, you'll pretty much get the deck handle the deck pretty easily. And so some people that may not have played a clan like Grand Blue may need to have more practice with it. And so that's one thing that I noticed from what Duke had mentioned, and so I just wanted to throw out that in there. But the main thing is that you're reviving using order cards, and so you're giving power. So you have Hush Dragon and Hydraulic Ram Dragon, where they are the beaters of the deck. You have him as being a 15k when an order is actually played that turn. You have Hydraulic over here that if you have a binded order already, it gets plus 5k until the end of the battle when it attacks. So this is an 18k beater, 15k beater by themselves, and it's just power. And then of course you have your Rancor Chain as you ride up to help filter, because you can Soul Blast 1, draw 2, discard an order, and if you didn't, discard 2. So it helps with filtering, digging deeper into the deck. So the winning image is really just build a board, have nice numbers such as like 28k, 33k, 43k and above, to really break through your opponent's thresholds, and using the Alchemagic and the revival properties, so you have enough advantage to survive till you actually go for that final turn. So yeah. So for your right line, so you can start out with any starter. I'm choosing the one from the set. Also, your grade 1 is the Rancor Chain. Just like I said, so plus 1, draw 2, discard an order, and that helps sets up for the next grade 2 skill. So when Husk actually is placed on Vanguard, you can choose one of your normal orders from your drop zone and add to your hand. So that helps you plus 1 from Rancor and plus 1 for Husk, so you get a plus 2. So that is one of the main methods that you want to start generating hand advantage and digging deeper into your deck, and of course reviving stuff. You can discard order cards with just using the right line mechanic. Remember, you have to discard a card to grab it from the right deck, so just be mindful of what you're discarding, and then also retrieving with Hush Dragon. This has a regard circle ability where if you played an order, it gets plus 2k. So this is a 10k attacker, 10k booster. It's really good in the sense that you just need it for 1. You can put it behind a grade 3, that makes that magic number of 23k, or in the case of like Hydraulic Ram Dragon, that'll be a 28k column just by itself, and not including any power-ups, for example. And so I only recommend playing 1, and this is exclusively in the right deck. There are other cards that help with better numbers and better boosters and distribute numbers and that kind of thing, and I'll dive a little bit what that looks like too. And Hush Dragon, I'm actually playing 1 copy too as well, so he's only in the right deck. As you ride up, you Soul Blast, so these cards will be Soul Blasted and be able to be accessed as rear guards if you need to too, especially in your early game. There's a way to get this card immediately out with Alania, and then you will eventually get access to Hush Dragon once you ride up to grade 3 and above at that point. And then of course Zorga with his skill Revival and Alchemagic. This is the one card that you want to make sure you ride, and actually just how the deck functions in general. So for the remaining grade 3s in the main deck, we're playing the remaining copies of Zorga. You want to be able to persona write. Again, you need power to push through. So rewriting is essential. Not only that, the orders like Spiritual Body Condensation and other cards use Soul Blast. You rewriting gives you soul, and so you'll realize that this deck needs to generate soul as easily as effective as possible. And there are other cards that help mitigate those costs, but it just helps just being able to persona write and build up the soul too. And then of course we have Hydraulic Ram Dragon. One of the things that I've tried doing was multiple Hush Dragons and cut out Hydraulic Ram Dragon out. This is something that I learned from Aggies MK2. With his video, he didn't like playing the grade 3s because they have no shield value. You're already playing a certain number of order cards which don't have any shield value as well, so you can't even guard with them because they're orders. And so for me, I found myself that if I can build a field that typically has a standalone unit without the requirement of booster, Hydraulic Ram made that a lot easier. So this is an 18k attacker, but then if you gave it with a 10k power up with an order or a persona right and so on, it becomes 28k, 38k on its own. And if you have a trigger, let's say you revive it with Zorga so you can bounce it back with Ghost Chase, which I'll cover in a bit, you make that magic number too. 5 plus 18 is 23k, and then so on. So it helps with that respect. So I only play 2, and whether you have a feel of Hydraulic Ram Dragons or even a pseudo on the side with Hush Dragon, you're still making beefy columns at that point. Now onto the Alchemagic order section of the deck profile. So these are the orders that we're playing. As you can see, we're playing a good number of them. We're playing 11 of them. And so you want to have enough just to see consistency, especially when you have mulligan. So you start able to discarding. And not only that, the orders that you want to see early on. And so that's one of the reasons why, as you can see with Spiritual Body Condensation and Grief, Despair, and Rejection here are played at 4 copies for me. I've seen a lot of people play 3s of that, and I can understand that because they want to have a mixture and also have a different name convention for the other orders that they're playing and make room, of course. But I feel like these are my go-to cards, so I want to see them as often as possible, as soon as possible. So having that consistency buff helps in that regard. One of the key tips that I want to say is that if you have a spot in the front row where it's open, I recommend using Spiritual Body Condensation first, so you revive the rear guard, and then the second ability from Grief, Despair, and Rejection will power that unit up too. So just be mindful of the timing. If you already have a front row, then Grief and Despair, Rejection can resolve first from the hand, and then if you use any of the other ones like these 2, then it's okay at that point too. And then this helps over here with Cursed Souls. Cursed Souls is Soul Blast 2. Look at the top 4 off the top of your deck, choose up to 1 unit and call it to regard, and then mill the rest. Now, if this was actually during Alchemagic, you can call it to 2 cards instead, and then send the rest, and then of course those units get plus 5k. So you're able to generate a feel with this too, and it might be useful too, and it helps milling too. So if you see this early on, it's nice too, but at the same time it helps building with 2 units on top of Spiritual Body Condensation, for example. So just be mindful that these are random. So it's okay, and that's why I play only 2, because it's a different name. I feel like this card might be replaced in the future too, but it's a good start. And I think in premium this may serve really good for decks that are like in Legion, for example. They can start building up the drop zone. It's a grade 3 order, so you can start playing it, and then if you can Legion, you can Legion, for example. With Ghost Chase over here, this is a blitz order, and so when your opponent attacks, you choose one of your units, it gets plus 5k, and so you also choose one of your regards and bounce it back. That isn't being attacked currently. So this allows you to revive defensive cards like PGs, heal triggers, the over trigger, for example. If you milled it, or if you used it already and it ended up in the drop zone, you can grab it back for with Ghost Chase in that regard. We do not have Greed Shade in D format, at least yet. I was so used to having access to Greed Shade from V series in that standard form, and then of course premium also has access to that I felt like I had a Greed Shade and I really didn't have it, and it's the closest thing we have is Ghost Chase, really. And what's unfortunate, it's during our opponent's turn. I wish if you can just revive something, use something like a Greed Shade to grab it into your hand immediately from the drop or from the field, whatever it works out. But Ghost Chase is really that card to help return defensive purposes. You can return Zorga copies, so you can have access to Persona right the following turn, which is a good setup at that point. And I want to play an extra one to go to 2, but there's only so much room, and so I've seen played 1 to 3 copies depending on the player, so definitely mess with that ratio for you. Ghost Chase is definitely a good card, so definitely give it a try. Now onto the remaining cards in the main deck outside of the triggers. So we have our grade 2s over here. We're playing 4 Hendrina, we're playing 3 Elania, we have 3 Advances with a grade 1 here, and 4 of the PG. And so there's only so much room left after all the orders and the other cards that we just went over, is that Hendrina is very key. And this card I want to spend a little bit of time because she has 2 phenomenal skills. The first one is that when it's placed on rearguard circle, you may discard 3 cards from the top of your deck. That is optional, but you mill 3. The second skill is that, retire this unit until the end of the turn. The next time you would Alchemagic in order and play it, you may choose not to pay all of the costs relating to Soul Blast. That's really helpful. Like I said, this deck doesn't have a way to really Soul Charge effectively and efficiently, so this card helps, like, you don't have to Soul Blast at all, so you're good to go. And the milling aspect, it reminds me of Skeleton Sea's Navigator from like Night Rose days. You wanted to set up your drop zone to get some of the key cards that you want to revive. Cards like with Spiritual Body Condensation, Alania over here, which is a segue to her, is that when she's placed from hand onto rearguard circle, you can Counter Blast 1, Soul Blast 1, choose a grade 2 or less card and call it to rearguard circle, and it gets plus 5k until the end turn. So you want to have viable targets, and Hendrina helps with that. So typically with Skeleton Sea's Navigator back in Night Rose days, if you milled with the skill resolving 2 to 3 times, you're in a good spot. I feel the exact same way with Hendrina. Again, remember that this card happens with the right line, so it may fluctuate with those numbers, and you just want decent numbers or decent cards in your drop zone to really start performing Alchemagic and also reviving. And so one of the key things is that, remember, you need a card that is an order card in the drop zone to even perform Alchemagic if you do have an order card in your hand, so it helps with that too. So that's why I'm playing 4. I want to see it as soon as possible. It's a great card to revive and then remove itself, and then use Alchemagic to replace something with like a beater like Hush Dragon or Hydraulic Ram. And then of course Alania helps with that. In the early game, again, I saw this from Aegis MK2's profile, is that when you go to your grade 2 turn, you immediately call this Soul Blast Rancor Chain and can call it as a booster, and it gets power. So you hit over that 23k threshold, which is good. So then you can attack with your Vanguard and then this column, and you could actually get 2 solid attacks in the early game. So you start having some early game presence. That is essential because Zorga doesn't really do much outside of what I just talked about earlier, and so the more damage that they're at by the time you ride to grade 3 or do your second grade 3 turn, the better it is for you. So you need some early game pressure at that point, and Alania helps with that. And so that's why I recommend playing 3. It's a decent number because after a while you may not use her, you may end up using Alchemagic more often than not. So with the grade 1s, you want to have, presence to be able to live, so you need PGs. Again, it's like if you basically have 1 or less cards in your hand, you don't have to discard. Again, it's a card that you can revive and bounce back with Ghost Chase. Here, Advances is very vital yet simple. I don't get it why, but I get it why. But point is when it's placed onto rearguard circle, choose one of your other rearguards and it gets plus 5k until the end of the turn. It's simple but yet super powerful because it helps with making numbers and making things happen at that point too. So just be mindful of that too. And I felt like the 3 is a nice number too. And so once you hit certain numbers, you can start breaking those thresholds of 23k, 28k, 33k, and so on. And it just helps with that regard. So more power to you at that point, right? And for the trigger lineup, we're playing 8 crits, as you can see, 4 heals, 3 draw, and 1 over trigger. So this ratio I'm messing with. I feel like Zorga needs that crit pressure, so that's why you want to play 8. The overdress trigger is really powerful because it's every trigger in the game. So this is another crit, so you can see it is 9 crits. With the draw PG, you want some advantage, and that's why the draws help with that. You can try with the front triggers to have more pressure, but I feel like you may start lacking some hand presence, and you want to make sure you have discard fodder for the PG if you need to guard early attacks that can kill you, especially Vanguard attacks, such as like Brant Gate and then other cards that just have criticals on top of them that restand, like Valiante, for example. So just be mindful of that. And so this trigger lineup seems to be working with. I think in the future, once we get more crits, I may consider going to even more crits, take out the PGs, or not PGs, the draw triggers, and go more crit. And I think that would be a little more aggressive, especially with the new cards that we're seeing that are better for the main deck too, to improve from there. And so that helps with that aggressiveness too. Now onto some of the basic plays and also combos of the video. And so as you can see, when you ride your grade 2 turn and you get your order and everything, you have Hush Dragon just chilling right here. So one of the things that I had mentioned is that you can call Alania over here, Counter Blast 1, Soul Blast 1, and Soul Blast the Rancor Chain, and now call it immediately to the back row. So when you Soul Blast something and you're reviving something, it becomes eligible in the drop zone. So it's a target that you can grab. Remember that she gives plus 5k, so this becomes a 13k booster with a 10k, 23k, right? And so if your opponent is at grade 2 or less, Even if they get a trigger, you still are able to hit. So that way when you attack, you do your drive check, then you attack, and you have 2 solid attacks right here that they have to account for. Now here's an example of a field formation that you want to have, at least for Zorga. And there's many field formations, and here's just an example, so I want to touch upon. So you have a Hydraulic Ram Dragon on the left here that's going to become an 18k attacker because you're going to have an order, so it's standalone. Not only that, you have over here Zorga with the Rain Core Chain as a booster. What's really nice is that it becomes a 10k booster, so you automatically become 23k as a column. Then you have an 8k booster here, followed over here by the Hendrina on the right. And so Hendrina is going to help you perform Alchemagic. So you would retire it with its skill, so now you don't have to pay any Soul Blast. And one of the Alchemagics that you can do is Spiritual Body Condensation. And again, you don't need to Soul Blast. And the card that we're going to bind and combine with is the Grief, Despair, and Rejection, or GDR for short. And so that goes binded, and now you perform Alchemagic. You want to revive something that is also powerful. So a card like that would be Hydraulic Ram Dragon as well. I forgot to set that up earlier. And so now that your front row also gets an additional 10k because of Grief, Despair, and Rejection, now you have some big numbers. And if you attack with a Vanguard to get more triggers, you have 10k here, you have 13, 23, then plus another 10, 33k. Any triggers, great. This is a standalone unit. This is 18 plus the 10k, 28k. Then you have over here, the next one, boosted by an 8k. So you have 18 plus 5 from Spiritual Body Condensation that I gave, and then another 8k, puts it on another threshold, and then of course the GDR as well. So you can see those numbers adding up pretty quickly too. If I do the math right now, it'll be 18 plus 5, 23, another 10 will be 33, 33 plus 8 would be 41, yeah, 41. And then of course, if you call the Admantis too, and let's say this was the one that you actually had on the field and revived this one, this actually helps with those stress swords, or you can use this to give power over here to help with that too. Now, if you didn't have the Hendrina, you can use the Hush Dragon in place of the second Hydraulic Dragon. So this becomes a 15k, and then the 15 plus the 8 makes that 23k, 23k threshold. That also helps with numbers. So that 8k booster matters in this case because it helps you hit numbers. And then during your opponent's battle phase, you can intercept with it, so you can revive it for later on. And then cards like the Hydraulic Ram Dragon are better off they just stay on the field, but if they attack it, then they get rid of it, and then you just revive it back too. But the only difference is that this is sometimes weaker if you don't have a booster to make it like better. But at the same time, it's a 5k intercept, so it may come up at that point too. Now, let's say you started to get a little more smart and you revive your overtrigger that accidentally got milled. And you revived it behind this Hydraulic Ram Dragon because it still helps with making numbers in that respect. And you want to grab the card with a card like Ghost Chase over here. So when your opponent attacks, your Guardian and everything like that, you would activate this, bounce the overtrigger, give plus 5k to your Vanguard, and if you need an extra 5k, you can intercept if you want, or drop any additional cards. Then they have a big massive attack that's still coming in, and guess what? You drop the overtrigger as 50k shield. So that is a very powerful shield. If you did the same thing with a PG, you would just grab that and then really go from there. And that's the deck profile, amigos, so I'm glad you got a chance to watch it and everything. And again, I just wanted to give credit to those who helped, whether it be suggestions or even watching their content, people such as like Duke, Stand Up to Soryu, Senpai, and of course even Agace MK2, his YouTube channel. So I'll be linking some of their YouTube channels in the description to check out their content, to their Zorga related videos too. Definitely watch those. They have slightly different builds too with different purposes. I feel there's some flexibility in Zorga right now, but I think as we get further into the new sets, we'll start seeing more of a solidification with the deck. And this is a deck that I recommend taking really the time to get to know and practicing with. It's something that you could pick up if you already have Grand Blue experience, but if you don't, it might take a little bit to understand. I think we see with the representation that Zorga is starting to get some more representation, but I think, you know, with other clans, or not other clans, other nations are just a lot easier to pilot, and so sometimes those cards or decks are just easier to play in tournaments and show representation at that point. If you liked the video, give it a like. It really helps the channel and everything like that. You know, share with a friend that is a fan of Zorga or stoicheia or overDress in general, and comment down below your guys' thoughts. You know, what are your builds? What are some ratios that you're trying out? What are you seeing some success? What are some things that made you consider changing up the lineup? You know, I'd love to hear that, because every matchup is different and it can change your perspective on things too. And then of course, subscribe, amigos. So next time, see ya, bye.